Well, as the world continues to open up, global aviation players like KLM, Brussels are already announcing record margins. But are Africa's players benefiting from this hike? Derek Nseko, publisher, Airspace Africa, speaks to us right about now for more on this. Derek, I looked at numbers just last week and a few details there coming in from the KLM and SN Brussels CEOs there. Very optimistic, looking on the upward for those two global players. But does it spell the same for African players at this moment?
Yeah, the outlook is, and thank you for having me, Arnold. Good evening to everyone. The outlook, I believe, is positive, and we're cautiously optimistic as an industry that we're experiencing some form of a recovery. Globally, yes, demand is still very much down. We're still at about 40% down in demand from 2019 levels. So the current environment is still very much depressed compared to the travel environment that we know from the pre-pandemic times. Yeah, but looking at the African landscape, I think there is signs as well that African airlines are starting to find their way back. We're seeing airlines across the board ramp up their capacity. Airlines are opening up new routes. Airlines are expanding their existing routes. I think we've seen some airlines even launch new international routes like Uganda Airlines. And what is really driving that as well is the acceleration in vaccination across the world, and the easing of restrictions, both internationally and on the African continent. So the signs are positive, and African airlines are very much part of the global picture as well. But our recovery is very much slower, especially because vaccination rates on the African continent are significantly lower than what we have on the global stage.
Great that you bring up that issue of vaccination. Inoculation still below 4% on the continent. But Derek, I want to be optimistic. So in a way, I want to kind of have a clean slate. Could we say, let's have a clean slate and not ever compare to the pre-pandemic levels?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Unfortunately, we do have to compare to pre-pandemic levels, but I think you very much have a point, because we keep talking about the new normal. Perhaps we need to accept that this is a new normal of the aviation industry. You know, if we keep looking back, for example, passenger numbers are at around 2013, 2014 levels. The industry has gone back about 8 years. If we look at the load factors, they are about 67% globally, which was last seen in 1994. You know, so if we start comparing to numbers from the past, you know, we are really going to disappoint ourselves. But I think it's 2019 remains a good parameter for us, because the industry was really looking very positive in 2019, and African aviation pre-pandemic the outlook was for it to grow at about 5.5% year on year for the next few years. So I believe we simply want to get back to the good times. And pre-pandemic, our African airlines were already struggling. So if you look at the context of a global pandemic, you can only imagine how bad things are on the African aviation landscape. So what we need is to get back into a place where our airlines and our industry is thriving, and for the associated industries, for tourism, to be back to a place where our economies can smile again.
Derek, two things have happened. We've seen the talks of consolidation that happened over the past fortnight between KQ and SAA. We're going to talk about that, but I want to look at the opportunity. Again, I'm remaining optimistic. Opportunity for small players in the sector, right? Where could this be the time that maybe the smaller players in the region, on the continent, can take that next step, can leapfrog from the national carriers? Could it be their great black swan moment?
Arnold, very interesting question. I think it is their moment in the spotlight, in the sense that what the pandemic has done is expose the poorly run airlines across the world and in Africa. What we've seen is that especially the privately run airlines, they've showed enormous resilience. They've showed great agility during this pandemic, and we've come around to what we already knew, that having a private sector mindset is exactly what we need in African aviation. But the fact is as well, Arnold, that the environment, especially the regulatory environment, is not enabling for private sector players. Our national airlines continues to dominate the aviation landscape on the African continent. Remember that also our African airlines are heavily subsidized, so the landscape is not at all level. The playing field is not level on the African continent. So private players will continue to have their own challenges on the African continent, but the stage is really set for us to absorb them and to give them an environment for them to thrive, because we can definitely see and clearly, especially if we look around the African continent, look at the southern part of Africa, SAA is a shadow of its former self, but Airlink, a privately run entity, was pretty much the de facto national airline of South Africa, and it's now one of the largest airlines in South Africa as it emerged out of an aviation crisis, and it suddenly became this huge powerhouse on the African continent. So private sector mindset is the way to go. Private sector players, we need to do more to get them on board.
And talking about SAA, interesting. I had a conversation recently with some investors from Zimbabwe, and talking about Air Zimbabwe as well. Now, consolidation, we've seen the talks there with KQ, and you've used the word absorption. Could we see these players absorbed, Air Namibia and the likes, Air Tanzania, to be absorbed into what looks like maybe strategic airlines that seem to know what they're doing for the betterment of the industry? But then that also takes away the competitive factor.
Yeah. Listen, Arnold, common sense says that consolidation really is the way to go. And we did not really need the pandemic to tell us that consolidation is important, especially for the aviation industry generally, because the economies of scale are extremely important for airlines to thrive. And this is one of the reasons why right now Ethiopian Airlines is the powerhouse that it is, because of its sheer size and its ability to leverage its economies of scale. But the political landscape on the African continent continues to inhibit the potential for consolidation to happen. We have a regulatory environment and especially some of the policies that do not allow or make it extremely difficult for certain forms of consolidation to happen. But what we're seeing now is that airlines across Africa are coming around to the fact that definitely they need to work together. We've seen SAA declare an intent to work much more closely with Kenya Airways. It's just an intention and a recognition that they need to work together, and that consolidation definitely is an important aspect of the aviation industry going forward in the African continent.